Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a terrific day out there today. Excellent show coming up. Velle E. Neal III, Star Tribune columnist, will join me here in a little bit. We are going to talk about Gopher men's basketball, where Ben Johnson starts the season. Good start yesterday, but the big picture, Velle and I will take a look at that in terms of expectations and what we should expect from Ben Johnson here in year 4. Do the Timberwolves need to make a change in their starting lineup? We'll get into that as well in our daily delivery debate segment, looking specifically at Jaden McDaniels. Wolves have a game tonight, just 7 games into the year. Probably too soon for that, but something they should be thinking about because of how many talented bench players they have, talented kind of interchangeable parts they have who could fit seamlessly into the starting lineup if they decide to make a switch. Velle and I'll talk about that. He and I will talk about Vikings kicking situation too. Will Reichard on injured reserve, maybe coming back after 4 weeks. We'll see. Didn't sound, the timeline's a little vague according to Kevin O'Connell on Wednesday. So what do we think of that? How concerned should the Vikings be about that? We'll get into more of that Gopher basketball game at the end of the show, as well as some interesting stuff from the winter meetings in baseball pertaining to the Twins. First, though, what I miss, I want to go deep on Vikings kickers. Velle and I talked about kind of the impact of Will Reichard's injury on this year's team, how that could play out. Vikings 6-2, going into a stretch now where they don't have a whole lot of difficult games, but still you want to be at the top of your game all the way around, and John Parker Romo will try to do that for them. Now, this is a bigger picture thing, though. I'm going to look right now at Vikings kicking history. I'm starting with Gary Anderson. Since Gary Anderson, I am ranking the Vikings kickers since Gary Anderson. Gary Anderson last kicked for the Vikings in 2002. So I'm ranking the Vikings kickers, 11 kickers since Gary Anderson, since 2002, not counting John Parker Romo, who will make his Vikings debut on Sunday against Jacksonville. Here is my ranking of Vikings kickers from worst to best since Gary Anderson, almost a quarter of a century ago. Last place, Daniel Carlson. Again, not fair. Not really fair in terms of the shake he got here. He's gone on to be an excellent kicker for the rest of his career with the Raiders. Obviously, if the Vikings had been able to have a little bit more patience in 2018, hadn't been Super Bowl or bust, just signed Kirk Cousins coming off an NFC title game appearance, they could have been a little bit more patient with him and might have figured out that, hey, yeah, this guy's a pretty good kicker. He just had the yips in one game and he'll figure this out. Instead, they cut him, but for a good reason. He missed 3 field goals at Lambeau Field, including one that would have won the game at the very end in overtime. Can't stick with him after that. So in terms of kicking infamy, he is up there. I put him in last place, even though, of course, he had a very good rest of his career so far. Next, Doug Bryan, another short-termer like Daniel Carlson, another guy with an infamous one-game blow-up. This was against the Bills in 2002. He missed 2 extra points. This was back when extra points were 20 yards. He missed 2 extra points in a game the Vikings eventually lost in overtime to the Bills, 45-39. Both of them were in the fourth quarter. Both of them absolutely impacted the game. Vikings scored the go-ahead touchdown with like 25 seconds left, but the Bills stormed down, tie the game with a field goal, and then win in overtime. That was pretty much it for Doug Bryan after that. So he is second to last on the kicking list. Next up, Paul Edinger. Do you remember Paul Edinger? He kicked for the Vikings in 2005. Don't really recall it all that fondly. He missed 9 field goals that season, 25 for 34, including going 3 for 8 from 30 to 39 yards. Just can't do that. Forgettable season, but I'm going to remember it right now. So Paul Edinger next on the list. I guess he'd be 9th on the list in the descending order. Next up, Aaron Elling. I never really had confidence when Aaron Elling was kicking for the Vikings in 2003 and 2004. And by the way, this was like the period of kicking instability. They went through a ton of guys in this period trying to kind of bridge the gap between Gary Anderson and whoever came next. It just didn't really seem to work out for them. And this was another example. Aaron Elling, 18 for 25. on field goals that season, including 6 of 8 from 30 to 39. That's not terrible. 4 of 7 from 40 to 49. This is a different era of kicking, but still, the expectations of kickers back then was that you were going to make a lot more than 72% of your field goals in the season. So Aaron Elling gets the number 8 spot on the list. Next, Dan Bailey. We really wanted Dan Bailey to be better, didn't we? He was pretty good when they brought him in 2018 to kind of stem the tide, be a guy who gave them the veteran stability after they cut Daniel Carlson. He was fine the rest of that year. Just didn't have a great rest of his career with the Vikings, especially missing kicks later on. So Daniel Carlson gives way to Dan Bailey. Dan Bailey made almost 80% of his field goals here, which wasn't bad. The extra points, which have been a problem for Vikings kickers, he missed 11 extra points, only 90.7% on extra points. He missed 11 extra points in those, 2.5, almost 3 seasons with the Vikings. That is a lot. 23 of 24 from 30 to 39 on field goals with the Vikings, but missed 11 extra points, 107 for 118. So I'm putting Dan Bailey there. I think he was supposed to be better than he was. Okay, next up, Morten Andersen. Now, just for pure optics, I'd like to put Morten Andersen lower on this list. He kicked for the Vikings in 2004, even after breaking their hearts in 1998. Forever linked to Gary Anderson, Morten Andersen was the kicker for the Falcons, who made the game winner in the 1998 NFC title game. He ended up kicking a season for the Vikings. It was a fine year, 18 of 22 for field goals, but he did not try one over 50 yards. He was 4 of 6 from 40 to 49. Just didn't have a huge leg at that point in his career. At that point, you're like, they didn't really try long field goals with him, so I'm putting him there on that list. He was dependable inside 40, basically, but every kicker should be in this day and age. So Morten Andersen, number 6 on the list. Greg Joseph, number 5. This is kind of more of a gut than anything else. He was okay. He made 82.2% of his field goals when he was here. That's like a little bit below the league average. He was pretty good from 50 plus. I never really got the sense that I was ever fully confident in Greg Joseph that he was going to make the kicks. And again, the biggest problem with him was the extra points. He missed 12 extra points in 3 seasons. Again, a guy who only missed 1 field goal, 25 for 26, between 30 and 39 yards. An extra point is ostensibly a 33-yarder, so kind of like an easier end of that range, but he missed 12 of those in his career. And yeah, you'd probably rather miss an extra point than a field goal. It's only worth 1 versus 3, but those are such momentum plays a lot of times. So Greg Joseph gets the number 5 spot on the list, even though his career stats were okay, and he never really had like a terrible season. He just was not quite good enough to stick around long term. Number 4, Kai Forbath. A little bit underrated, I think. Kai Forbath, 88.7% of his field goals were made with the Vikings, 47 of 53, including 7 of 10 from 50 plus. He made a huge clutch field goal against the Saints in that 2017 playoff game before the Saints then came down and made a field goal to go ahead. Before then, the Vikings got the Minneapolis Miracle. He was a pretty good clutch kicker, would be higher on this list, might still be kicking, I don't know if he'd still be kicking, but he might still have been with the Vikings for longer if, again, the extra points weren't such a problem. 45 of 53 on extra points, it's just 85% on extra points. So better on field goals than extra points in his Vikings career, but still, I remember him as a pretty good clutch kicker. I thought, why are they getting rid of him when they drafted Daniel Carlson? Turned out to be a mistake all the way around. Number 3, Blair Walsh. Laugh all you want at how it ended. Laugh at where he stands on this list. Say it's faint praise. Blair Walsh was a pretty good kicker for most of his Vikings career. Made 84.2% of his field goals, 24 of 34 from 50 plus, including every single one of them. I think it was 10 for 10 that he tried in his rookie year. He was Will Reichard, who we'll get to in a minute, before Will Reichard was Will Reichard in his rookie season. He was almost automatic as a rookie in 2012. A sneaky part of the reason that team went to the playoffs, finished 10-6 against a lot of odds. Yeah, Adrian Peterson, an all-time rushing season. Percy Harvin was fantastic at the start of that year. They won some close games. Blair Walsh was a big part of that. He was a pretty good kicker for most of his tenure. Just don't ever have him ever try a 27-yarder in the freezing cold in the playoffs against the Seahawks, because that was the beginning of the end. Number 2, Will Reichard, already number 2, just because of how you feel when he's kicking, when he's healthy. When he's kicking, when he's healthy, he did not miss a kick this season. Now, you got to wonder how soon he'll be back, how big of a deal this is, as Lavelle and I will talk about. But I already feel like he's the second best kicker in this span. He might quickly, if I do this list in 1 or 2 years, he might be number 1. But right now, he's number 2 based on what we've seen. The feeling that when he kicks, he is absolutely going to make it. A lot of those kicks are just dead center, perfect. You have confidence in him. Number 1, Ryan Longwell. The longevity, made 86% of his field goals, 98% of his extra points. He was just basically an automatic kicker, especially from shorter distances, but still 11 of 17 beyond 50 yards. He was just a very solid kicker for 6 seasons. And again, the greatest what if in Vikings history will be what if he would have gotten a chance to kick them into the Super Bowl in 2009. We will never know the answer to that, but I would have liked their chances because Ryan Longwell was their best kicker since Gary Anderson. It's daily delivery debate time here with Lavelle E. Neal III. Lavelle, we got some juicy ones here. We talked about these ahead of time. Number 1, right off the jump, Gopher men's basketball season started Wednesday. It's a big year, a lot of us would say, for head coach Ben Johnson. Lost a lot of roster turnover again. Some promising young players coming in, but you look at it and kind of the college basketball landscape, it's going to be hard for them to compete this season. If it's hard for them to compete this season, does that put Ben Johnson on the hot seat?
It shouldn't, but I'm thinking that it would. There are some national websites and publications that already have him as a candidate to be on the hot seat this year. And I don't think I think it's a little unfair. Last year, I criticized him at the start of the year saying that he needed to have a good season or he should be on a hot seat. I thought the Gophers played a lot better during the second half of the season, had a couple of surprise wins, a couple games they fumbled away that they could have won. But they ended up 9-11 in the Big Ten and ended up with 19 wins and going to the NIT. And I thought that was satisfactory given how terrible the previous 2 seasons were. But then the offseason came and college free agency came and the roster has been decimated. And, it's just dealing with the reality of college sports and the financial landscape and the transfer portal. I feel bad because, the Gophers have been building a relationship with Farrell Payne since he was like a freshman in high school. And you put in all that time, all that effort, all those meetings, getting to know the family, getting to know how he ticks, then getting him on campus, then developing him. And then someone gives him anywhere between $300,000 to $500,000, and he's at Texas A&M. No one was recruiting Elijah Hawkins to come play basketball. He may be 5'8". He may not be that tall. Ben gave him a shot. He responded by being one of the leading assist men in the nation last year. But here comes the NIL money, and he's gone to Lubbock. Oh, by the way, Elijah, good luck on your transition from living in Minneapolis to living in Lubbock, Texas. All right. And the other thing, too, is because the Gophers and a collective is not a powerhouse, they've got to pick and choose who to keep. They had a chance to keep Dawson Garcia, and they kept him. If they had kept Farrell, they probably could have kept Dawson.
Yeah.
And Dawson turned down 7-figure offers to stay with the Gophers.
Right, which is bonkers, yeah.
So Ben said, screw it. I'm going to go to the opposite right here. I'm going to bring in a bunch of senior mercenaries who are going to be desperate to have a great final season in a college career and see if it can work together. None of these guys were impact names on the national level. The other hype, like AJ Storr going to Kansas from Wisconsin, that's like a big time move.
Right.
The Gophers moves pale in comparison here. So I don't think Ben deserves to land on a hot seat because the forces of free agency and college sports have killed this program.
Well, an NIL and basketball. Yeah, NIL and basketball is different than football, right? Like it's having an impact on football, and in a positive way. Sometimes for the Gophers, you see them bringing in Max Brosmer. He's had a huge impact on them. Again, though, a guy coming in from New Hampshire, maybe not one of those bigger names, but it's definitely worked out for them. But in football, you need so many more guys. Like, you can spread the money around. Like, not everybody's going to jump. Like, if you can add some impact players, you're going to lose some impact players, but you play more as a team. You lose 2 guys in basketball, it completely can derail what you got going. So I feel like NIL is a much bigger deal in basketball than in football, just because of the roster size and how much impact 1 or 2 players can have. And the collective's getting better, but it's still not what it is at some of these other powerhouse schools.
No, it's not. No, not in the football. I mean, who's paying for an offensive lineman unless maybe you're Georgia or Clemson or someone like that? So the Gophers can still recruit in that area and bring in good players. It's tough now. And the other thing about this, too, incoming freshmen are going to want to get paid. And you put someone like the University of Minnesota, who doesn't have a big NIL coffer. Do you give the money to the incoming freshmen, or do you give the money to keep the good players that you have? I would lean toward the latter. So that is going to that's going to affect your recruiting. So it's just a mess. But you know what? Everybody's in the same situation. There are a lot of colleges like the University of Minnesota. Ben's going to fight through this. And if he can win with this bunch of transfers, it's going to be one of the better coaching jobs in Gopher history, I think.
I would agree with that. We'll see where it all ends up at the end of the season. Lavelle, subject number 2. Do the Timberwolves need to consider sooner rather than later, and they play Thursday night, their next game, do they need to consider sooner rather than later a change to their starting lineup, more specifically benching Jaden McDaniels, putting him in the second unit, and bringing in either DiVincenzo or Alexander Walker to start these games, because he's not having a good start to the year?
I was wondering if this was a Mike Conley question, because Mike is not got up to
it could be. It can be. And and I think some Wolves fans would also say, should Naz Reid be starting and Julius Randle be coming off the bench? I don't think we're going to do that. But however you want to take this, my biggest concern is Jaden McDaniels right now, but Conley's been a big concern too. What are your thoughts on changing the starting lineup? This bench has been really good. Like, those first 3 off the bench are excellent. The bench has been good, so you got some chemistry there. But what do you think about changing the starting lineup if this continues?
This would be a cold water splash in Jaden McDaniels' face, and maybe it needs to happen, because all we've heard for the last couple of years is that Jaden's got to work on his offense. Jaden has to round out his offensive game. He's got a fat contract by basically being a defensive player who rebounds a little bit. You got to bring more to the table than that in the NBA, especially when you're getting the bag like he's getting the bag. Okay, so maybe it does need to happen. This is the time of year to do it, because teams still are trying to figure out what they have and what they are. And you've got 20. Finchy said this at media day. Need about 20 games to figure out what your team is doing well, what it needs to be, what needs to be corrected, what needs to be altered. I would experiment at this stage of the year with a couple lineup changes. I think McDaniels is definitely a candidate to be benched. Maybe for DiVincenzo, maybe for Naz. I don't know. No, not Naz, but maybe for someone else. Yeah. The one guy who's gotten Nikhil Alexander Walker, he finds little ways to get a little bit better every year. Mm-hmm. His 3-point shooting has been on point. He's distributing the ball well. And by the way, that's an unheralded aspect of Julius Randle's game. I think he's averaging 4.7 assists a game. Yes. He's a great for the overall health of the offense. Yes. But Nikhil is in this roster where they made marked had a desire to make it a deeper roster. He has not lost any minutes. Let's just say he hasn't deserved to lose any minutes. Right. But Jaden has. I'm also worried about Mike Conley, but I don't know how you would just replace the point guard. You got to hope that the 37-year-old Conley gets his game working, because he's shooting 30% from the field. His assists are down like 1.5 a game. That's got to be – and I'm more worried about that than the scoring a little bit. He can score less if he wants, because he's got enough guys, especially if you replace Jaden with Dante. You got guys who can score the bucket, right? Score buckets. I want to see Conley be the distributing force and the assist guy that the Wolves need him to be. That means he needs to average about 5.5 assists a game. So, I'm looking at Jaden McDaniels, and I'm hoping that Conley gets straightened out here pretty soon. But I think you're onto something here, because this is the time to try to make adjustments and experiment with different things. And maybe it'll be a wake-up call to Jaden to get his offense going a little bit.
Yeah, and two things on that. One, I just don't feel like McDaniels is improving, right? Like his game is kind of the same as it's been since his second year in the league. It's just not getting any better. And you keep waiting. Like Finch always says, like a good barometer of their offense is how involved is Jaden McDaniels. Too often, he's just not involved. He's too passive, and he's not making the shots that are coming his way. Number two, I'm a little less worried about Conley now because I think it was Jace Frederick from St. Paul tweeted, like he's always been a slow starter. Even when he was younger, he's always been a slow starter. October has generally been his worst shooting month throughout his entire career. Maybe just takes him a little longer. And yeah, he's got some kind of wrist thing that he's got to work out. That's been something that's plagued him forever. So I think there's some signs that he's getting a little bit better, that he's going to be at least close to the player we thought he was, because they need him. They don't have like a true point guard aside from him. I don't think you can make that switch unless you're going to go to Dillingham and go young. I don't think they're ready to do that. But no. I think the McDaniels swap absolutely deserves attention because, yeah, like you said, it could be a wake-up call for him, and it could just give them more life at the start of games, better player in there right away, and maybe have him go to a bench role and not have as much pressure on him. All right, last one. Will the kicking game sink the Vikings? Now, it's been great. It was great all year. We were all waiting for like the other shoe to drop. We're like, all right, at some point, Will Reichard is going to miss a kick. It's going to cost him, blah, blah, blah. Like, hey, make sure you miss one at least before the NFC title game. Let's not have Gary Anderson all over again. It's more serious than that, though. He misses 2 kicks against the Colts, and we find out that he went into the game injured, didn't really tell anybody about it. He had a strain. Now it's on IR. They're going to be, using a different kicker. Probably sounds like John Parker Romo for 4 games at least. New long snapper, too. And Lavelle, like I've talked to a lot of kickers over the years, especially Ryan Longwell when he used to be with the Vikings. Like that whole operation takes a while to get going. This could be kind of rough and choppy. Is this something that we should be worried about?
Absolutely. These are the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes.
For some reason, the football gods have played with their kickers going back multiple years. Yeah. Anderson in the NFC Championship.
Yes.
Carlson wide left from 27.
Blair Walsh.
I'm sorry, Blair Walsh. I meant
Blair Walsh in 2015. John Carlson in 2018.
Yeah, but Carlson, giving up on Carlson, actually. Carlson ended up having a nice career,
Yes. Daniel Carlson, not
Daniel Carlson. Wow.
Yes.
I apologize.
I was wrong. I called him John Carlson. That's a former Viking too. But anyway, go on.
But yes, through Vikings history, they've had issues with kickers. It looks like the gods are like, okay, we're going to tease you with Will Reichard and his wonderful leg that may be the first kicker to kick a field goal from 72 yards or whatever. Right. We're going to tease you with him, but then we're going to take him away and we're going to return you to the hair-raising, heart-stopping moments that you're used to having as Vikings football fans. Here's JD Romo, and here's a replacement long snapper off the street. Good luck. Right. So the snaps have to be on point, although the long snapper has some NFL experience.
Yes.
Plenty of NFL experience.
Yes.
John Romo has never kicked in an NFL game.
No.
This is crazy. I mean, I feel bad for the Vikings, but this just screams that something terrible is going to happen. Like, he may sit on the bench for the entire game, and in the fourth quarter, he may be needed to put the Vikings ahead or tie the game for his first NFL field goal attempt.
Yep. What could go wrong?
Vikings Nation will be shaking in their boots at this possibility. I'm sorry, Vikings fans. I'm just using history as a guide here. This is what happens to Minnesota Vikings and Minnesota Vikings fans. Their kicker lets them down. Even the best ones have foiled them. And now you've got John David Romo. Good luck with that.
Now, it's the middle of the season, so you would imagine that Reichard comes back healthy at some point, and he can still be the kicker. He still feels like their long-term solution, right? This is a short-term problem. He's definitely their long. Yeah, he's great. He was automatic for 7 games. Like, just he came on the field. Like, you've never had that feeling as a Vikings fan for a long time where you're like, okay, he is going to make this kick. Like, no matter how far away it is. Like, it was shocking even when he missed the 53-yarder, let alone the shorter one after that. You could tell something wasn't right with him. But so you had 7 games of that. Now you got 4 games at least where you got to kind of ride this roller coaster game. Now, the one bright spot is, Lavelle, let's face it, this isn't against the world's greatest competition. They got the Jaguars on Sunday, and oh, by the way, Sounds like Trevor Lawrence is limited in practice. We're not sure if he's going to play in that game.
Oh, boy.
Then you've got the Titans after that. Then you've got your Bears, who are a mess.
Who are falling apart. They're
falling apart.
Ready to sitting there with an apple in their mouths, ready to be slaughtered.
And then you got Arizona after that, which isn't a bad team, but that one's back at U.S. Bank Stadium. So those are the four that you'd be without your kicker. And then, if you can get him back after that, then it's the Kirk Bowl after that. The Falcons come in here. So
those next three games are on the road, though, right? So David Romo has got to kick on the road. And see, I'm trying to think of Jacksonville.
I think it's John Parker Romo. I think you're confusing him with John David Booty. Are we combining names, or is it John David Romo and I'm wrong?
I think you're right. This has been an awful performance.
John Parker Romo. John Parker. That's okay.
We've mauled names in this segment terribly.
Oh yes, that's okay.
I apologize for everybody.
John Carlson, John Parker Romo is the kicker. But yes, you're right. All three on the road. Like, the weather shouldn't be too much of an issue in these first two. You wouldn't think Jacksonville, Tennessee, those will be relatively nice. But kicking in the wind of Chicago in mid to late November might not be the best thing for an inexperienced kicker.
No doubt. I remember, one of the greatest kickers of Bears history, Robbie Gould. His first year kicking at Soldier Field, he attempted a kick, but the wind was blowing from right to left, and the ball was headed straight down the middle of the upright. It ended up in the left corner before it got through the goalpost. Yeah. It's just a tricky place to kick it, especially later in the year. And that game's November 24th, and that's right when the weather could be nasty. It's coming off weather off the lake, could be snow. Like I said, the game could be on. The Bears may amazingly figure out a way to be competitive, making that kick a big one. So yes, not the best. Being able to have your first field goal attempt in the NFL in U.S. Bank Stadium would have been nice for the guy. Yes. But it's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. They're going to have 3 straight road games. Now it's incumbent on the rest of the team. Now sometimes you see this where someone gets injured, even a kicker, and you're like, okay, everybody's got to pull their weight. Let's not have this come down to a field goal. Play things a little bit tighter, make sure you take care of business. Sometimes you see that. So we'll see if they respond against Jacksonville and make sure this isn't some sort of thing where it does come down to the kick. Although, by the way, Mark Craig, our colleague, keeps tweeting out this amazing stat. I think they're 13-1 during KOC's tenure when they miss a kick during the game. 13-1. They went to 13-1 during his tenure when they miss a kick. When Reichard missed those 2 the other day. So for some reason, it hasn't affected them to miss all these kicks.
That's weird. It's
wild. It's very strange.
That doesn't add up. But no, it doesn't. Sports sometimes doesn't add up.
No,
that's what makes it so entertaining.
It does. I hope you guys were all entertained by us today. Lavelle, appreciate it. We'll do it again next week, and we'll get the names right next time too.
Thanks, John David Rand.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate-saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Good stuff from Lavelle. Reminder, you can find those segments, the Daily Delivery debate segments, on our YouTube page, Start Tribune YouTube page, so go check that out if you want to see us rather just hearing us. Let's finish with the cooler postscript to the conversation with Lavelle. Gophers cruised to a win over Oral Roberts in their first game Wednesday night. Good start for Ben Johnson's Gophers. Great start for Dawson Garcia, 30 points. Oral Roberts picked to be like a middle-of-the-pack team in the Summit League, just below St. Thomas, so it kind of shows you where they're at. But Summit League's not a bad basketball league. That's so I think that was a good showing by the Gophers to kind of cruise to get out on a good note. We'll see, obviously when the competition gets more difficult where they stand, but a good start for Ben Johnson's team, giving them a chance to have a good season. We'll see how all these pieces fit together. And I'm sure I'll have Marcus Fuller, Start Tribune Gophers men's basketball beat writer, on a show soon, perhaps as soon as next week. Also, interesting stuff from the baseball winter meetings. Mega agent Scott Boras, never one to shy away from offering his opinion, talked about the sale of the Twins. Now, this is interesting just because, A, it's another opinion. B, Scott Boras represents Carlos Correa, Royce Lewis, Joan Duran, Ryan Jeffers, Chris Paddock, a lot of prominent Twins players. Correa, of course, the highest paid Twin by a large margin, saying about new ownership that it brings, quote, a refreshed view about why they bought the team. Understanding this, Boras, this is an interesting quote. I realize it's an investment, but they understand now that I don't want to walk around my city and have my last name changed because I understand my last name is now winner or loser. I don't think any ownership ever realizes that until they buy the teams, until they're involved in the sport. Then all of a sudden, they understand that regardless of their great business success that allowed them to buy that team, their presence in our country is probably just noted for the behavior of that team they just purchased. Interesting stuff. So I don't know if that presages some sort of type of ownership, but that is interesting to hear Scott Boras say that. I think Twins fans would be heartened if there was an owner that came in and spent more money than the Pohlad family, even though the Pohlads were, good stewards for the game for a lot of the time. Things like that. Owned the team for 40 years through some ups and downs, certainly. The highs, of course, being the 2 World Series early after they bought the team, bringing a new outdoor stadium here, things like that. A good run in the 2000s when they made the playoffs a lot. But I think everybody's ready for a change, and I think if people can see the change be a good one, that will only, of course, increase excitement for 2025 and beyond. So interesting stuff from Scott Boras, as reported by Bobby Nightingale, Star Tribune beat writer, down at the owners' meetings in San Antonio. That will do it for me today. Good stuff coming up in tomorrow's show. Expecting to have Ben Gessling with me, talking Vikings, big picture Vikings, not so much just hammering on what's going to happen next game, things like that. I think we've kind of lost sight a little bit of the big picture. This was supposed to be, in my estimation, a rebuilding year, so I want to get Ben's take on where they stand for 2025 and beyond. Until then, I'm Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow.